Okay. uh, Before we get started with plenary session 2, Hazel, please flash. Okay, I'd like to us to look at the results of yesterday's session, plenary session 1. I will not read all of this to you, but I just want you to take note. What we've done here is really an amalgam of the different papers, no? The different papers have pointed to us the key issues and challenges, as you can see, the gender-based differential impacts of climate change, women being portrayed as victims rather than powerful agents of change. Hazel? Okay. Women facing different vulnerabilities, women having less assets, which lead to more vulnerability, and women and men have different strategies and play different roles with climate change. Then roles women can play in defining actions for climate change. You have an enumeration here. Then you go down. There are some suggested legislative measures, such as, go back to the legislation. Let me read through that. Construct a legal regime that safeguards the security of the security of climate change, including mechanisms to review land use planning and infrastructure work. Ensure that government policies and programs on human rights, women's rights, including CEDAW and climate change are coherent and reinforce each other. And a third suggestion, incorporate climate change in discussions on women's rights and related interventions which often focus on political, social, and economic empowerment and protection in a non-disaster context. So the third set of recommendations, go down, please. Actions required to mainstream gender. Please note that the theme of plenary session 1 is mainstreaming gender in climate change adaptation, as opposed to plenary session 2, which is about mainstreaming gender in disaster risk reduction, okay? So here, you have a number of recommendations also, one that pertains to information and research, planning and policy making, capacity building, enhancing women's participation in climate change adaptation, and several actions at national level and at international level. What I just wanted to say this morning is that we've tried to compile the different actions recommended by the speakers and that emerged out of the interactive discussion yesterday. I know that we will not have time to read all the papers thoroughly, so we have summarized this, and hopefully you can use this in the parallel sessions. Yeah? This is like a menu of actions that you can choose from. Okay? So with that, I'd like now to shift the floor to our chair, Mr. Manny de Guzman. Thankfully, we have a man. Are we sure, Manny, we have a man? Manny is actually a veteran in disaster risk reduction. He used to be connected with the Philippine Government Office of Civil Defense, no? Where he did disaster risk reduction work, but is now on his own. He has retired from government and is consulting with a number of organizations, including the UN International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. So Manny, take it away.
Thank you, Lucy. Good morning to all of you. You look so happy today. I suppose you're happier today than yesterday. After the very lively socials last night, and also the lively exercises of Remy this morning to open our session. And we welcome you to our plenary session 2. And can I have my first slide, please? We are actually joined here by several distinguished uh, panelists, guest speakers from different sectors. And we will be focusing our discussion on the theme mainstreaming gender in disaster risk reduction, issues and challenges. Just to give you a introduction or an overview of our plenary session, these are some of the messages that were echoed in yesterday's sessions. Starting from the messages given by our in the keynote and in the presentations yesterday, the message that gender, climate change, adaptation, disaster risk reduction are closely linked. Do you still recognize this message? This was echoed yesterday. And Dr. Salvano Briseño also made mention that existing methods and tools of disaster risk reduction provide powerful capacities for adaptation to climate change. And disaster and risk reduction and adaptation to climate change share the same ultimate goal, which is to reduce vulnerability, increase resilience, and achieve sustainable development. There is also a key message conveyed yesterday that climate change adaptation starts with disaster risk reduction. Now, for our presentation today, we have actually 5 major presentations and 1 film to be shown. The first presentation is on the challenge of reducing disaster risks and the YOGO framework of action, to be given by Dr. Feng Min Can, Senior Coordinator of UNISDR Secretariat. The second is an overview on the World Disaster Reduction Campaign 2008 to 2009, Hospitals Safe from Disasters, to be given by Dr. Linda Milan, Director, World Health Organization, Western Pacific Regional Office, followed by the presentation on environment and disaster reduction in a changing climate, emerging gender issues, by Ms. Clara Nobe, Associate Program Officer of UNEP. Next, we have a presentation on gender, disaster risk reduction and legislation by Dr. Cheryl Anderson, Director, Hazards, Climate and Environment Program, University of Hawaii. And then lastly, a report on making disaster risk reduction a tool for adapting to climate change. This is a report on the outcome of the UNISDR consultative meeting with parliamentarians, which concluded 2 days ago, by Senator Lauren Legarda of the Philippine Senate. And then as a recap, we will show you an ISDR film entitled Everybody's Business. Then after that, we shall have, next slide please, we shall proceed with the interactive discussion.